And now, presenting a boy who has stamped his name into the game history as, yeah, okay, I am not doing that. My speech impediment will literally destroy me if I try. Anyways, Cuphead! The 1930s themed run-and-gunner who, after a lot of dedicated man-hours of animation, has run-and-gunned his way into nearly everyone's hearts overnight. You guys certainly showed so, as he is the most requested character that you guys wanted me to give a Smash moveset for, as I'm sure you noticed. But real quickly, let me get a couple of things out of the way. Some of you may be confused as to why I'm doing Cuphead now, since it did announce beforehand that I was going to be holding off on him until the Delicious Last Course came out, or at least until we learned more about it. Well, we did learn more about it. Specifically that it needed to be pushed back until 2020. Good for them for prioritizing the health of their animators, but it's also been information that I've been waiting to hear. Now that I know the DLC won't just drop randomly anytime soon, and because I don't want to wait for what could be a whole year to do my most requested moveset, I decided that now was as good a time as ever for Cuphead to join the What If roster. I'm sure the DLC will have some cool new stuff that I could have used for the moveset, but that's just how it be sometimes. Maybe I'll make a video in the future after the DLC comes out talking about what could have been. But enough of that, let's get into Cuphead himself, a young boy who lives with his brother Mugman and caretaker Elder Kettle on the magical island of Inkwell. After the two boys made the mistake of taking a rigged bet with the devil himself, Elder Kettle bestowed onto them special powers, so that they may take down the other runaway debtors as well as the Lord of Darkness himself. And it will be these powers which will allow Cuphead to keep his milk from spilling over in the world of Super Smash Bros. He would be a below-average middleweight class character with 2 jumps and no additional movement options. Also for some cool aesthetics, whenever Cuphead dodge rolls, he could do the dash animation from his game, and his air dodge could have him use the smoke bomb charm. So as I try to make known, I tend to not look at other Smash movesets online before I actually make each specific character moveset to avoid them influencing my own ideas. But if there's one thing that I am fully aware of, it's that most people feel that Cuphead would play much like Mega Man, having Cuphead's shot attacks be used as his basic attacks. Well, I actually disagree with this idea for Cuphead, mainly because I feel like it would make Cuphead's Pea-Shooter too limited when compared to his original incarnation in his game. For Mega Man it makes more sense, since he can only shoot his weapon straight forwards anyways, so it was already limited. But Cuphead can shoot his weapon into all directions, so I feel like the Pea-Shooter should be relegated to a special, but I'll go over that later. With that said, you may be wondering then what I'm going to be doing for Cuphead's basic attacks. Well, one thing that I feel should be very much emphasized with Cuphead is not just his run-and-gun aspects, but also the fact that he's based off of a 1930s cartoon character, drawn in the old-fashioned rubber-hose style of animation. A style of which, as I'm sure many of you are aware, tends to get very trippy, and does get taken full advantage of in the game of Cuphead as well. Something that I do find kind of ironic though, despite Cuphead being the main character, he's actually the least crazily animated character in the roster, with his animations being rather tame compared to just about every other character in the game. But regardless of that, I would very much like to emphasize the crazily animated nature of the 1930s cartoons in Cuphead's moveset, with his attacks being just as crazy and nonsensical as we see in those old cartoons. As such, I really had to go out there when it came to the animated attacks. So take all these with a grain of salt, as I wanted these to be asinine, and they could have literally been anything else. So getting right into it, Cuphead's jab would be a 3-hit jab that starts with 2 basic punches that mimic the style of old-fashioned boxing, and the 3rd hit could have him end it with a stronger launching punch, morphing his hand into a large boxing glove, not unlike the attack that we see from the boss Cuphead Grande. His dash attack could have him trip and tumble over into several comedic rolls before he ends up on the ground bewildered. The rolling would only deal small flinching damage, with the attack's large launching damage coming from the end of the attack when Cuphead hits the ground. Alright, now let's add some real flesher to these moves. For Cuphead's side tilt, he can grab the handle of his head, detach his head off of his body, and swing it forwards horizontally. And when he does, his head changes into a hot iron. Yep, this is where we're going. For his up tilt, Cuphead could stick his thumb into his mouth, blow, and cause a small explosion of milk upward from his straw. And for his down tilt, he would lunge his legs forwards while low to the ground. And while he does, his legs morph into push mower blades to deal quick multi-hitting damage. Right now you guys must be so confused behind the logic of these attacks. Don't think too hard about it, it makes perfect sense in the context of those old cartoons, I promise. That said, however, for his smash attacks, these will make reference to attacks that Cuphead can use in the game. More specifically to some of his EX special attacks, as well as a single art. For his side smash, this will be the one time where he actually does go all Mega Man on his opponent and uses the EX form of his pea shooter, the Mega Blast. Subtle. It's a large projectile that travels horizontally, and its size and range increases the longer it's charged. Again, just like Mega Man's. Moving away from the Blue Bomber, Cuphead's up smash will have him use the Radical Barrage straight upwards, causing a kinda large explosion directly above himself. It would have a great amount of coverage vertically upwards, but would have a harder time hitting shorter foes standing right next to Cuphead. For Cuphead's down smash, he would utilize kind of a nerfed version of his third super art obtained by saving the mysterious legendary chalice from the final mausoleum, the Giant Ghost. In the original game, this special had Cuphead use a super steroid injected version of his own spirit to deal big damage to enemies with a powerful lariat. For Smash, Cuphead would bring out a smaller version of that ghost, which would spin in place right over Cuphead, hitting on both sides with both fists as he lariats a few times. For the neutral aerial, this could utilize the Whetstone charm that Cuphead could obtain, an item that allows Cuphead to turn his straw into an axe, and allowed him to attack foes with his parry. For Smash, it would have Cuphead do a front flip while his straw morphs into an axe and swings in a full 360-degree spin. For the remainder of his aerials, let's go back to some crazy innovations. For his forward air, he can spin the whole upper part of his body with his arms held out horizontally like a fan. Look at the animation we see done by Croaks during the boss fight with him and Ribby, which by the way are made as subtle references to Ryu and Ken. That'd be an interesting interaction. Anyway, this attack would deal multi-hitting damage before launching foes with the final hit. The back air could be a single launching blow that would have Cuphead morph the bottom half of his body into a cannon and fire a quick explosion. His up air would have him morph his straw into a ratchet noisemaker. You know what I'm talking about, those obnoxious sounding party favors that you spin to get on the sober people's nerves? Cuphead would spin it above himself twice. It has a decently long active hitbox, but can only hit foes once, as it will launch them simply by hitting them at all points of this attack. And finally for his down air, which would be the most dark of the bunch, fitting considering the context and theming, it would have Cuphead's feet turn into cinder blocks and fall straight down while he panics. This would be a strong attack, but it would only end when Cuphead hits the ground and breaks the cinder blocks open to free his feet. Meaning that if you use this over the blast zone, then you'll definitely be swimming with the fishes, see? Cuphead would grab with one hand and would pummel by quickly spinning his head in a fast circle, smacking the foe with the handle of his head as he does. For his forward throw, he would cup his hands together in front of his mouth and blow, turning his hands into a horn and blowing the foe away. The back throw can have him trade places with the opponent with the use of his smoke bomb charm, and when Cuphead reappears, he would be holding a fire hose from which his straw morphed into and spray the foe towards the back. This would be a throw that turns Cuphead around. For the up throw, he'd perform a magic trick for all the kiddies out there. He'd cover the foe with a blanket, which they would disappear underneath, but then shoot them out of his straw straight into the air like a cannon. And for his down throw, things get a little more devilish. A hole would randomly appear under the foe's feet and they would fall into it. Cuphead would panic and look into the hole in fright. You would hear devilish laughter and see flames emitting from the hole, until finally, the hole literally spits the foe out into the air with a loud belch, also knocking Cuphead over in surprise. Alrighty, now let's start getting into Cuphead's actually seen attack, the shot. This will be his neutral special attack. Tapping or holding the neutral special button will have Cuphead shoot his shot straight forwards, but after starting the attack, you can use the control stick to aim the attack into any direction. And you can even walk around and jump while firing the weapon. Gotta keep that jump and shoot element after all. Also, if you want a more precise means of aiming, if you hold down the grab button while Cuphead is firing his shot on the ground, it'll lock him into place, and allow the player to fire into any direction they choose without moving. Now, something I've been pretty vague about so far, I keep referring to this attack as the shot, but in reality, Cuphead actually has numerous different shot weapons that he can obtain in the game, all of which have differing properties. All of these shots will be accessible here, and you can access them with the use of Cuphead's down special. Cuphead will always start a match defaulted to his pea shooter shot, which is the first weapon that he gets from the Elder Kettle at the beginning of the game. And just tapping the down special will default Cuphead back to the pea shooter if he had a different weapon. Holding the down special down is what will allow Cuphead to choose a different shot for Cuphead's neutral special. With a UI similar to Shulk's, holding down special will pull up a small menu around Cuphead that shows all of his available shots, and holding the control stick into the direction of a different shot will change Cuphead's neutral special into that shot. Normally in the original game, the player is only allowed to bring up to 2 shots with them to a battle, and can change between them freely as they fight. But for Smash, I think it'll be a bit more interesting to allow Cuphead to have access to all of his shots, as just limiting him to 2 would be kinda boring. Now getting into the shots themselves, they of course all have differing attributes as well as advantages and disadvantages. But they all do have one thing in common. None of them deal any knockback whatsoever. They only deal damage. This overall should be an attack that the Cuphead player should be utilizing at all times to quickly rack up damage to their opponents, and really have no excuse to not be constantly holding the button down, just like in the original game. If you weren't holding down the shot button at all times, then you were doing something wrong. But let's go ahead and get into each of the shots themselves, which would all behave near identically to how they do in Cuphead's game. Starting with the default pea shooter, this shot has an indefinite range, meaning it'll go on forever until it touches a blast zone. And it deals average damage to opponents when compared to the other shots. Let's say that it'll deal about 2% of damage per hit. The next shot on the roll would be the spread shot, which would have the worst range, but is shot in 3 forward directions. Each individual shot would only deal 1.5% of damage apiece, so this weapon would be better to use when closer to opponents to rack up the damage very quickly with all 3 shots. The next shot is the chaser shot, which is a homing bullet that will actively follow the closest foe to Cuphead. Better to use if you don't trust your ability as a marksman, much like myself. I'm terrible at aiming. The downside is that this is the weakest shot, only dealing about 0.5% of damage with each hit, and the range is not indefinite, so they will disappear after a bit if they aren't able to hit an opponent. The next is the lobber, which would have the slowest firing rate, being able to only shoot 1 a second, and each shot would be affected by gravity, meaning that they will fall and hit the ground not long after being fired. But these are the strongest shots, capable of dealing a whopping 10% of damage with each hit. And finally, the last shot would be the roundabout, a boomerang shot that goes forwards a set distance when fired, but then immediately turns and goes back indefinitely into the opposite direction after it reaches that set distance. This shot will deal 1.5% of damage if it hits foes while going forwards, but will deal 2.5 of damage if it hits them after turning around. Something else I should mention is that the shot neutral special would not be affected by stalling, meaning you can use them as much as you want and they will never weaken. Now I can already hear you guys yelling at me saying that I forgot a shot. You're of course referring to the charge shot. Well, I decided to go ahead and relegate this shot to his side special, as it functions slightly differently than his other shots do, so I felt it appropriate to separate it to a different button command. The charge shot mechanically works identically to Mega Man's Mega Buster in the Mega Man games, being a weapon that of course can be charged when you hold the button down and increases in power the longer you charge it for. And it would work just like this for Smash, just tapping the side special will have Cuphead fire a kinda slow projectile with rather pitiful range, but it deals 6% of damage and does in fact cause knockback. Holding down side special will charge this move up, and it will be automatically fired into any chosen direction as soon as the button is let go. The player can walk and jump while charging, and can cancel the charge by shielding or dodging. The charge does have a peak of course, and it takes about 4 seconds of charging to reach it. From there, after it's fired, it releases a large blast that can deal big damage and knockback to any foe. It wouldn't be as strong as, say, Samus's fully charged charge beam, mostly because this move is pretty versatile and I don't want it to be too broken, but it is still very much a dangerous move. And finally, for Cuphead's up special, it will have him use his parry slap. Parrying is a means of mobility as well as defense that Cuphead can do by slapping anything that's pink, giving himself an extra aerial boost while also neutralizing whatever pink thing it was that he parried off of. For Smash, this up special would act as a type of extra jump, having a random pink dot appear right under Cuphead and he would immediately parry off of it, sending him up higher into the air. He would be able to use this move up to 3 times in the air before going into freefall, and he is able to move left or right as he does this. If an opponent is too close to Cuphead right when he uses this move, they will get hit by it, being dealt some small damage and knockback, and Cuphead will actually be sent a little bit higher than normal as a result. This attack will also neutralize any projectiles if the player can hit them with proper timing, which will also send Cuphead a little higher than normal. Now I know I am breaking the parry rule here by letting Cuphead use it on non-pink things, but that would make it way too situational for the Smash setting if I did otherwise. And it's not like this is the first time that some rules were broken to make a moveset work for Smash anyways. But overall, this up special would act as both a great defensive tool and also just a great get-off-me kind of tool if the Cuphead player is feeling too pressured by the foes, but it does require good timing to use, just like in the original game, and using it all willy-nilly can lead to some easy punishes. So for the final Smash, I actually have 2 ideas here, mainly because these are both some of Cuphead's most powerful attacks, and really either would work just fine, so I just couldn't decide. The first idea would simply have him use his first super art, the Energy Beam, which would have Cuphead fire a large beam of milk straight from his head horizontally forwards, pretty much working just like Samus's final Smash. Simple, but still very effective. The other idea that I had could be a cinematic final Smash that could incorporate his Super Bomb morph. Cuphead would do a super parry attack that, anyone hit by it, would be pulled into the Smash. The screen would then transition to an old film grain style as we see Cuphead fly around in his aeroplane before turning into the Super Bomb, and fly straight into the caught foes, dealing big damage and knockback. This Smash would also end with a large comical explosion, so even foes that weren't caught in the final Smash who are too close to it could still take damage, much like with Incineroar's final Smash. But of course, the foes who were actually caught in the Smash would be dealt way more damage than those who were just casualties. So going into the colors, the default would of course be Cuphead in his usual getup. His first alternative color would give him yellow colors, which would be in reference to the cover of the Cuphead soundtrack. His next would make him just black and white, in reference of course to the fact that most cartoons in the 1930s were in fact colorless. The fourth would give him a purple straw and shorts in a slightly darker hue, in reference to the bad ending of the game if Cuphead chooses to make the wrong choice and sell his soul to the devil. The next would be an alternative costume, which would of course be Cuphead's brother, Mugman. You guys are probably wondering when I'd bring this guy up, huh? And I know some of you are probably wondering why I chose to make him a costume and not an Echo Fighter. Well, to put it simply, there's no need. Cuphead and Mugman are mechanically identical in every way, even in their original game, and they just don't have any radical differences that would require Mugman to be separated as an Echo Fighter. That said, however, before I move on, I would like to get an idea of an Echo Fighter out of the way that I did originally have planned. And that was going to be for the character Miss Chalice, the newly revitalized playable character being added to the DLC. Admittedly, she was the major reason why I was putting Cuphead off until we got more information on the DLC, and since it was pushed back, thus leading us to still know next to nothing about her new role in the game, I decided that it'd be best to not include her for now. As I said at the beginning, when the DLC does come out, and if I decide to make a video going over things the DLC adds that could have been included in a Smash moveset, I'll be sure to talk about Miss Chalice as a possible Echo Fighter as well. Anyways, getting back to the right side of the tracks, the first alternate color for Mugman would be him in a pink color scheme, in reference to the pink parryable items. His second would just give him a black and white color scheme as well, one to go along with Cuphead's. And the final, to also complete the set, would give Mugman an indigo color scheme, also in reference to the bad ending of the game. For their stage intro, here's an interesting idea. It could have a giant film reel pass over the stage, with each frame showing Cuphead in a different walking frame, and he would start speeding up enough so that the frames align properly to show the full walking animation as Cuphead walks closer to his spot. Then the reel quickly rolls up, revealing Cuphead who's raring to go. For the first taunt, it could show the animation the boys have whenever they gain a new special power, with their limbs pulsating before lifting their own head up for a tip of the glass and their straws become an exclamation point. The second can have them do a hard flex with bubbles spilling out of their straw, an animation that Cuphead sometimes does at the beginning of boss fights. And the final will have the boys pull their straw down and drink their own head fluids. Ew. This was an animation that we see Mugman do sometimes at the start of boss fights. And finally, for their victory animations, for the first, you would hear "Knockout!" be screamed, and show the boys jumping up and down excited like we see them do at the overworld after completing a level. Then show them pose with both hands on their hips, just like we see Cuphead do on the end of level result screens. The next would have them do that goofy dance that we see them do in the trailer for the Switch version of the game. Then do a pose holding their hand up, just like Mugman does on the end of level result screens. And the final would have a huge sign fall in front of the boys that reads, "The End," looking just like the back of the book cover that we see after beating the original game. Then they'll poke through the sign and begin waving towards the crowd. That's all! But that actually is all, folks! For if Cuphead had a Smash moveset along with Mugman as an alt. This one was a long time coming, as so many of you wanted to see it, and I really wanted to do it. I had a lot of fun with this one, being able to be about as flexible as an actual rubber hose that those old-fashioned cartoons were styled like. So I hope you all enjoyed it just as much as I did making it. That said, if you'd like to see even more characters be given possible Smash movesets, be sure to subscribe. And if you have a character that you'd like to request to be given a possible Smash moveset, leave a comment down below, or contact me on Twitter at BrowFan1 on Twit. I hope you all enjoyed, and thank you so much for watching!